this is really...
Wrong side. Don't worry about that side.
Okay, you say so? Boom.
We're on.
Dude, that was quick. Out of nowhere.
I wasn't ready. I was like, are we on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Day 5.
Day 5, 11 days of reefing.
Awesome.
Learn something new every day.
This is a big one.
All right, so...
We love talking about lighting.
This is all, actually there was 5 episodes of lighting back in 2015.
Yeah, we're going through episode 18 today through episode 22, T5s, metal halides, hybrids, light in general, LEDs. We're all covering it today.
All right, I think you guys will get a kick out of Doyle Brunson's guidance today.
We got a twofer.
Twofer, man.
Twofer.
So the first one.
So I changed the title of this. Today's stream instead of omit the word man and put in reefer.
I know, I agree. I was going to say the exact same thing. That's funny. You and me, dude, linked.
Yeah.
All right. So a man with money is no match for a man on a mission.
A reefer with money is no match for a reefer on a mission. 100% true.
Yeah, today's inspiration for from Doyle, man, and you wouldn't believe how much of this applies from
right
gambling to reefing. And I really, as we explore this, continue to think that reefing is a form of gambling, man. You're just making educated bets, and every outcome is a little bit of a gamble.
So if you're really good at this hobby, you probably should go play some poker, go to the casino.
Probably. Actually, we play poker at the...
I do like poker.
At the, Macnas and Reefer Paloozas. Come find us. Okay, so a man or a reefer with no money is no match for a reefer on a mission, and so that's just true. Like, you can spend an infinite amount of dollars on lighting or really anything else and not achieve the same results as somebody who is going to win intelligently, brute force.
It is my goal to solve this. I'm on a mission to solve it, and I'll listen to all the information that it takes to solve it and then apply it.
Okay, so they might spend money, but they also might DIY their own LED board.
Yeah.
You know, who knows?
Yeah.
You know, you can do all kinds of different things, but like, it doesn't require money to be successful here. You can just choose to do it through a sheer amount of wisdom and intelligence. You could figure out the light that works terrible at 8 inches, install it at 24 inches off the tank, and just make it work. All right. There's an opposing viewpoint on this one, which is probably equally true, which is, to be a successful gambler, you need to have a complete disregard for money. All right, so I think you can replace the word reefer again, man. Yeah. To be a successful reefer, you have to have a complete disregard for money.
And there's a certain level of it that, you're going to spend money on this. Whether you take a cheap DIY on a mission path, there's money to be spent. There's not only just like money, but like value of my own time too. Right? That has a dollar amount to it.
I just want a plug-and-play solution. I want to put it up and have it look sweet on the tank, in the tank. I'm not going to invest the next 12 months of my life trying to figure out the actual, be the person on the mission. So I think you can do this either way, which is you can have a complete disregard for money and buy your way to the top of the problem. Use the best available solutions out there and just plug them in the wall. Yeah. And then also, you can choose to do it by being a reefer on a mission. Either way, and I'd be curious to hear the comments after this one. All right, so in that spirit, there's a second process here: is bet on that high percentage outcome. Everything can work once. We need to get past that. So, in that spirit. The number one or episode, is it 18?
Yeah, today we're on episode
18 already.
I know.
That's crazy.
18. Today we're on episode 18 of 52 Weeks of Reefing. This one was called Aquarium Lighting Replicating the Sun Over the World's Reefs. And we're doing this in a little box in our Midwest home or wherever you may be.
All right, so the number one thing most of these corals need to survive is actually energy from the sun. Without that, no go. All right, so we're emulating that, and there is a core belief here. So this is the thing that guides us on almost all of our decisions here, which is there is a direct connection between the sun and the best performing artificial light sources.
Yeah, there's a parallel.
Yeah, these things tend to emulate each other, and you're going to see that by the end of today's episode. It's not just a light you plug in the wall, but what the sun does and why these things are so closely interlinked. So, in that spirit, what matters most?
Yes.
Number one. This is the one that is really hard for people to grasp.
Yeah. So the first thing that matters most when it comes to replicating the sun over the world's reefs is that the sun is the primary light source.
No, the sky.
I'm sorry, the sky. I read that wrong.
Yeah.
The sky is the primary light source. So not that little burning ball of gas way millions of miles away. It's actually everything that that light touches before it hits the ground, so the atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's hard for people to grasp, to be honest, that the sky is the light source. And ultimately, obviously, it's the sun that created the light to begin with.
Right.
But it's the sky, when the light hits the atmosphere, it breaks up the light and diffuses it, and you can see it. From horizon to horizon, it's blue light, right? So there's blue light coming from every angle that is, covering everything that you can see. It's the reason that when I walk out, if the sun happens to be behind a tree, everything isn't pure black.
Yeah.
It's the reason why the sky isn't pure black looking into inky space.
Yeah.
So what happens is the atmosphere breaks up that light and scatters it in all kinds of directions, basically everywhere, and just blankets the earth in light, right? So it is actually the primary source of light, is the sky. There are two other forms of light, though. One is obviously very directional. It's when the sun comes out, it's not behind a cloud, it's in the middle of the sky.
Straight in.
Nothing is blocking it. It is a very, very, very powerful source of light, right?
Yeah, well, even like you said, like cloud cover or midday, early day, it doesn't matter if a cloud rolls through, you can still see. Like an eclipse doesn't even stop the reflection of light to 100% like dark.
Mm-hmm. Like this is one of those things too where when we started this hobby, everybody thought we were trying to emulate the sun, try to find 2000 par or whatever, right? And now what we know, from not only from finding out what works in a reef tank, in commercial environments, and the most actual hobby environments, what WWC shares, what Dana Riddle shared in the wild, using a PAM fluorometer, getting the rates of photosynthesis, is we found that the corals actually photosynthesize the fastest in the morning and the afternoon.
Where the par's about 200 to 350, maybe upwards of 500.
Yeah, and where they're not getting directional sunlight pounding upon them. And in fact, when the sun is actually hitting them at midday, they're actually slowing down rates of photosynthesis intentionally and protecting themselves from it. So while people are busy thinking like, oh, it's the sun, we're emulating the sun, it's not, man. It's the sky. And the sky is, like, if you think about the sun too, it's so directional. It's coming from this direction. It's going to hit only this side. And everything else behind it is shadowed. Everything you've ever seen about a shadow tells you it's shadowed behind it, right? The reason that it might not be shadowed is because there's so much illumination coming from the sky as well, lighting everything. So
yeah, I mean it's hard to grasp that it's the sky. It's hard to grasp that it's the sun. But even when you get to not just like par and intensity and things like, when you talk about spectrum, the spectrum that we see, here above water is different than what you'll see underwater. We're going to get to that too.
So it's also not surprising to see the historical things that like reefing, or if you've been around for a while, pre-LED, all the most successful paths pre-LED emulated not the sun, which is a single point of super bright light. It emulated a big, gigantic light source, basically horizon to horizon, meaning it was a giant bank of T5s that covered the entire tank. covering the tank from horizon to horizon, eliminating shadows from every direction.
Yeah.
Metal halides the same way. In most cases, the halides,
Big giant reflector.
huge reflectors, and like the reflector itself is the source of light that is 2 foot by 2 foot, and so these things were giant, and they were, multiple on there intersecting, and it lit the tank from horizon to horizon from a seemingly infinite amount of angles. Whereas the sun would have been just a single point of light. And in some ways, the halide kind of behaved like both, which was it has that little point of light in the middle, the little bulb inside the bulb.
Right.
But most of the light's actually reflecting off the reflectors back down
Well
in the
over
tank.
well over half, 75% of your light
Probably
comes from the reflections.
in that neighborhood. So when you see the historical standards, they were emulating what you see in the wild too, or in nature, which is the sky, big, giant, like illumination, not 2,000 par, but the type of par you would see in the morning and the evenings when the sun isn't pounding on it.
I wonder how much of that was intentional in the design of the T5 or the metal halide, like
Accident.
coming at it from the approach of that mentality.
Well, we didn't have any other options then.
Yeah.
Only if you wanted that kind of light, it was coming out of a fluorescent tube or a metal halide bulb.
Yeah.
And then the metal halide bulbs that were inside of little tiny reflectors created laser beams.
Yeah. Well, it made sense for T5s to be big because I can get a T5 bulb in almost every length of the actual tank. So, when I'm picking for a 6 foot tank, when I'm picking a T5, why would I pick a 24-inch T5? I would pick, the 60-some inch.
The reason that I'm going to tell you for sure, it was just a happy accident that the T5s and stuff of the world emulated this, is because nobody designed the LEDs afterward to emulate that, right? They didn't go there to emulate the success there.
With the understanding that you're trying to emulate the sky.
Yeah, the first rounds of LEDs were actually super narrow little laser beams trying to hit 2,000 par on the bottom. It actually went the exact opposite of what we know now. And so that's how I know that the T5s and the halides were largely an artifact of the technology that was available. It just happened to work out well. But all right, shimmer lines are also a third type of light that comes out in nature and that we emulate in our tank as well. Sometimes called glitter lines.
Caustic lines, yeah. So, that's the iconic swimming under the ocean, and you just see these big bands of wavy. It almost looks like intense white light, but after get filtered by the ocean and everything, they're like a blue variation of the blue on that blue spectrum, but.
They are
but they hit a coral
much higher par,
like 100 times or thousands of times a day, just by the shimmer. Yep.
Yeah, the nature of it is it's flickering on the coral. Essentially, it was 300 par, but now it's 2,000 par, but just for seconds, like milliseconds,
splits.
In fact. And we can. This is one that you can debate whether or not is beneficial to the coral or not. I don't know the answer to whether or not the shimmer is part of a beneficial process for the coral. I will tell you that it is not necessary.
No.
I say that not necessary because I've seen...
We already know it's not necessary. You've seen the success of T5s.
Yeah,
zero shimmer.
T5s, zero shimmer, super even, sustained light without the shimmer, and you can produce some awesome tanks that way.
100%.
So... is it beneficial? Maybe we can debate that forever, but is it required? No, definitely not. Okay.
It does look good to the eye, though.
All three of those light sources, though, a primary light source like the sky, a supporting light source like the sun, and I know it sounds strange to say it that way, but it is true. It's the sky gets its light from the sun, but it illuminates the earth. The shimmer lines, all three of those things are a blended cohesive spectrum. Now they're a little different. The sky is obviously illuminating blue spectrum, where the sun is a more broad spectrum, including yellow and orange.
In infrared and UV. Yeah.
Yep. They're a different spectrum, but they're all cohesive, meaning it isn't peaky. It isn't like shooting little laser beams of red down. You can't see red and green shooting all over the ground.
Yeah.
So it's all cohesive. And we should also note that water filters out spectrum.
Yeah, this is that if you were to take your our spectrometer or a spectrometer out, point it at the sun or just straight up in the air outside, you'll get this full band all the way from the violet or ultraviolet to the infrared, and you'll see this like wide. It's not like a peak in the blue and then a little bit of red. It's probably going to be a band completely across that covers the whole thing. But once it touches water, and then the depths of the water start to filter it out, starting with the red end and working way towards the blues.
In fact, it's even theorized that the corals are able to regulate photosynthesis based on the exposure to red. Meaning, as the sun rises and it gets more and more intense, more of the red light is going to make it through the water, especially corals that tend to grow closer to the surface of the water. The more the red light's going to, and that may be actually the indication that it should try to slow down photosynthesis. Yeah. This is an experiment that I'd love to run. Yeah. But that is one of the articles that I've read, is that they're theorizing that that's actually the mechanism. Like the coral isn't capable of recognizing, intensity.
Intensity of PAR, yeah.
The amount of photons. It actually is
changes in the spectrum wavelengths.
Yeah, spectrum wavelengths, the difference between the sky and the sun.
Interesting.
And then the intensity of the sun, the amount of it that's making its way through. And then the deeper that you go in the water, very little of the red actually makes it through. And if you're diving, you won't see red anywhere. Everything looks blue. It looks almost like a tank that you're taking pictures of your tank with your phone without the little filters on it. It's just overtly blue. Yeah. That is the way it looks in nature.
We try to apply, and then you think about applying that philosophy of the water filtering out the spectrum to our reef tanks. And you look behind us, this is like a 20-some inch tall tank. If we were to put the full daylight spectrum of the sun over this tank, I don't think it's not deep enough water, and it's not like a big enough body of water to actually do this in our own home. So we have to adjust for it and account for it, which is why we see the blue tanks here.
Yeah, so you use bluer lights in general for that purpose in many cases, because like 6 inches of water isn't going to have the same effect.
Not enough to filter. Yeah.
All right, so that's what matters most, and I'll just kind of do a 30-second recap. What matters most when you're thinking about it, and in direct relation to the core belief, there's a direct connection between the sun and the best performing artificial light sources, is that artificial light sources, best performing, will respect the fact that the sky is the primary light source, will respect that the sun is supportive, and ocean flow, by the way, supports that really intense, getting rid of the oxidants and helping to slow down the photosynthesis. Shimmer lines may look cool, but be more, and the three have a cohesive spectrum. So the hard lessons, though, that we've learned are significant in relation to replicating the sun over the world's reefs.
Yeah. Hardest lesson learned is that shadowing is the biggest setback our industry has faced. So with the adoption of new technology, LED specific, shadowing wasn't an issue before. When you have coast to coast, horizon to horizon light like a T5, big giant reflectors like Metal Halides. As soon as I start putting all that light in a form factor that doesn't spread it out into a big giant source of light, now we're talking about if you were to eliminate the sky and only have the sun, there would be like this beam straight down, which means I have shadows everywhere except for where that beam is shining down. And now when it comes to a coral that can't, like a stick that can't move, it's just kind of stuck here and stuck to the whim of this single point of light going like this and maybe traveling. But in our case, the single point of light is straight down, and everything around this and below it is now shadowed.
I mean, I've even seen this in like forests where you go and there's certain trees that grow too fast that are faster than the rest, like pine trees. Yeah. And there's nothing on the ground floor. Yeah. It's outshadowed everything down there, and the only thing that can survive is the fastest growing organism. Yeah. Right. And you see this in tanks too, like the green slimer and
big tabling colonies and aphlos.
They'll all grow everything else and shadow them and kill them all down below unless you do something about it. And when I say the sky is horizon to horizon, it's not just left to right. It's 360, man. It's a globe, right? Yeah. It's illuminating the entire sky and sending this light back down. Okay, so shadowing now, in our case, think of it in a couple of different ways. One, like you can literally see it. I mean, we're creating these tiny little pucks of light, and then they're really easy shadow. I put my hand in it and see the shadow beyond it. We're doing shadow tests now in the lights that we test, and you can see that it shadows itself, its inner workings. You can see it shadows the neighboring coral. There's no question. And the reality of it is, if you shadow and half of the light doesn't make it because it's blocked, the coral's only getting half of the energy, and it's super dependent on the other half now as well as flow to get the energy over there. And if any of that ever doesn't work, man, that's when you're going to start to see all the die-off happen on that coral. That's where you're going to see the die-off on the base of the coral that's not getting any light. And so if you can get that horizon to horizon, in our case even better in the glass box, because the horizon to horizon is going to bounce off the glass and back in, and that's why you can actually see underneath corals, and why in many cases here we have corals that grow that would look kind of like in the dark, but it's not in the dark, it's light reflected off, it's just not as bright as the rest.
But this is this was one of the biggest setbacks our industry has faced, is because we didn't not take into account the needs of that coral, and like how the shadows cause less growth in the shadowed areas, or even death in the shadowed areas. So when LEDs hit the scene, and it was coupled with like more par, more better,
narrow lenses,
laser beams into the tank, no wonder a lot of people failed with these lights initially.
Par wars made, let's get as focused as we possibly can down there. Luckily we're past that now, but I'm going to say this again because it's a hard lesson, and we say it's the biggest setback our industry has faced. It's because we went from in a world where T5s and halides, lighting was not your problem. You will never have, lighting will never be the reason you didn't succeed in that case. And so now, man, we implemented new technology, and I will say, it's just the way I believe it, we implemented it wrong. And so, and then when I say we, I mean the whole community implemented it wrong with a handful of exceptions, right? The thought leaders out there, I guess.
Or happy accidents.
Or happy accidents as well, And so, and also part of the reason is that like you won't notice this effect when it's all tiny little frags. You'll notice it when the corals grow out. And so when they're 8-inch colonies is like the saddest part is you thought that you were on the right path.
Oh man, look at this thing grow. Look at my little nubbin grow. It's got more nubbins. It's got 3 nubbins. It's got 4 nubbins.
Yeah.
And then once you get to a certain point, like a year later, it starts dying.
Right where you want it to be its best is when it's actually, they're close to each other and it's really filling out all the color. That's when all the disaster starts to happen. And that's part of that conversation we had earlier, which is you have to, whatever journey you were on before is only measured by today.
You have to evolve with the growth of your tank.
Yeah, the skill set has to change. How you approach it has to change. In this case, you can just choose to, there's no harm in having 360 horizon to horizon lighting to begin with. And then the tank can just grow into it. You can add it later.
You can.
But you have to understand when that importance would be there. Another hard lesson is features don't grow coral.
I fell into that trap too.
Yeah, phone apps,
disco mode, cloud cover, storm mode, all of those cool, fun features.
Christmas mode,
they don't grow corals.
Yeah, none of that stuff grows coral. I don't know. I like features as much as anybody else does.
Fan of features.
But I'll pick gross coral over them every single time. So consider that when you're thinking about this. We mentioned this earlier. Yeah. Another hard lesson is midday par is not the goal.
Par wars. Like if somebody went out and said, all right, I'm going to build a light that emulates the sun. Let's go out in the ocean, middle of the day. I mean, for me, it just makes sense. It's be logical for me to go out and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make something that emulates the sun. Let's go out in the reef in the middle of the day when the sun's at its most and take some par measurements and be like, all right, that's the goal. 1,200 par, 2,000 par. I can make some light that emits 2,000 par. Let's try it out.
In a focused beam.
Yeah.
Okay, so midday par is not the goal. It's actually mostly in the morning and afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, and another hard lesson is par is literally the easiest thing to get right. I mean, like, at this point, I can tell you confidently that a vast majority of LPS corals will thrive in 50 to 150, and SPS corals 200 to 350. I'll also tell you the high end of that is the most dangerous. The low end they'll tolerate for a really long time. Meaning, so start on the low end and work your way up, not the inverse. Right? This is the easiest thing because you can get a par meter.
You have a tool that will tell you exactly where to be, and it doesn't have to be. It's not a perfect science. I mean, there's parts of this tank behind me that have like 500 right up here where the corals grew up into it. But when there was a little nubbin down here on the rock, it was in that 250 to 350 zone.
You just have to not be grossly off. And like we did an experiment where we tried to test all of the pros here, whether or not they could see par, and nobody could. They couldn't guess par.
Can't do it by the eye.
Par. They even know these lights. And one of the guys is actually the guy that does all the lighting testing for us. He knows exactly how it was, and he was trying to use some intuitive thought, and he messed a bunch of these things up because you just can't guess these things. Your eye is not a tool for micromoles. You know, it just isn't. So I will tell you too, you can get a $200 par meter nowadays. You can plug it in your computer. You can also just get a par meter from us, use it for 2 months,
return
it for like a 10% restocking fee.
You don't have to pay full price.
Yeah, you could 2 months means that you could like use it yourself, tune the lights, give it to your buddy, turn the lights. And we're trying to make it easy here, by the way, if it's not apparent. 2 months means you could do anything you want with your lights and get them perfected. You could probably share it with 3 of your buddies, do that, and send it back.
And then once you set it, you never have to touch it again.
Yeah, then once it's set, dude, you'll never touch it. Send it back to us, and pay the 10% restocking fee, call it a day. Is it 10 or is it 20? I forget.
I forget.
But anyway, it's not that much. We're designed to make it easy for you and not have to incur all that cost. All right, another hard lesson is the pursuit. This is kind of like the features thing. The hard lesson here is the goal is actually to grow coral in the tank and keep them alive sustainably and make them look awesome. The pursuit of technology is not the goal.
So when you're talking about the next lighting technology, plasma versus instead of LED and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, plasma came up many years ago and never materialized.
It didn't do anything.
The nature of it is the thought leaders and stuff all want to do new cool things,
Oh yeah.
And the reality is nobody wants to use old technology on anything in their hobby.
Connect it to your smart home and tell Alexa or Google to have it do something for you and this and that. And like what we just goes back to this other one, features don't grow coral. But
yeah, they do, man. Like the pursuit of technology here is not the goal. It's use the best available technology to produce the best available result.
And we're still not all the way there either. There's still some progress on the table to capture, to build a light that does what matters most up here.
And so we are today going to go through halides, T5s, LEDs, hybrids, all of the stuff in the pursuit of that. But I'm going to tell you right now, I agree with you that nothing so far has 100% done this out of the box. And none of these, a lot of them are good for different things, but none of them do all the things that the average reefer would want out of the box. So
there's still room.
There's still room to improve. In fact, the biggest thing, I think, if there's one takeaway in all of this in episode 18 here, I would say it's shadowing is that biggest setback our industry's faced. The sooner that the community adopts that and accepts it, the sooner the manufacturers will start producing solutions for that, because I'll be frank, man, most of them don't want to sell things that like they're afraid you're not going to buy. And if shadowing isn't a concern for you, they're not going to make it. We have to have a world where like they're going to produce the things that like people buy, because like you look at the Illumina, that was a big giant grid of LEDs over the tank. I thought it looked slick actually in that aluminum form factor. It's really low profile, but nobody bought it. So you look at that from a manufacturer, like these businesses go out of business if you don't buy it. They're not going to take that risk. We actually have to say as a community, we want certain things, otherwise they won't make them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we got down aquarium lighting replacing the sun over the world reef, the basics of what we're trying to achieve here. What's next?
Next, we're on episode 19, and this one is all about T5s. Episode 19 of the 52 Weeks of Reefing was called Compelling Data for Using T5 Lighting on Your Reef Tank. This is actually kind of that start of some Investigate series tests that we did. Got some data on the T5 lights and talked about it in the 52 weeks. But here's the core belief where we stand today on T5 lighting.
That was 2015.
Yeah.
All right, back then. Today, I will say that our core belief on T5 lighting is this. T5 is the ideal biology, and replacing the sky effect of that horizon light.
Replicating.
But it's not the future.
Yeah.
So T5 is the ideal biology and replicating the sky effect, but not the future.
Not the future.
T5s are blanketing the whole tank in light from every direction. It is the sky effect of horizon to horizon, 360 through the whole tank.
Blended even spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming from all angles, especially when you think about that it's not illuminating the tank per se, but it is illuminating the aquascape inside. Then the lighting object is bigger than what you're trying to illuminate, which means it literally is coming from every direction.
360.
Bouncing off the glass, back in. It's coming from everywhere because it's such a wide angle form of light. So T5 is the ideal biology, replicating the sky effect, but the hang up here is it's not the future, and we'll share a few reasons as to why.
Sorry, but it is the truth.
I know that's a hard thing to hear, man, because you got this like technology. I mean, still sitting on this one right here behind us.
And there's a lot of discussion in the hobby of like, oh, everybody's a bunch of the pros and people are going back to these old technologies like T5s and Metal Halides. And we're going to talk about that. So what matters most when it comes to T5 lighting and using it on your reef tank as it relates to the core belief. First one is lighting. Like you said, lighting is larger than the object it's trying to illuminate. So when you look at any tank, you look at this tank behind us, you look at your tank at home, you're not trying to light or grow the glass. You're not trying to light the edges of the tank. You've made an aquascape inside of the glass box. It doesn't touch wall to wall and edge to edge, so it means you're going to get some space between the glass and your actual aquascape. So when you talk about lighting it being larger than the object you're trying to illuminate, my aquascape is only this big, but the T5 light is 24 by almost 24. If you're talking like a 60-gallon cube in an 8-bulb 24-inch fixture. That thing is definitely bigger than the single coral or the multiple corals I'm trying to illuminate on the aquascape.
So the goal here is to wrap the object in light. So if I stuck up my hand here and I only had one direction of light, I'm going to see a shadow behind it on the floor anywhere. The only way you're not going to see a shadow is if the light object is significantly bigger than my hand, meaning the light is coming and hitting all sides of my hand and the ground behind it evenly. That's the only way. And so if you think of a coral reef in the ocean, the sky is absolutely bigger than the reef. It's coming from every angle all over the place. And in a reef, with the T5s, not only is the light object, a grid of T5s, bigger than the aquascape in most cases, but again, because they're super duper wide angle coming out of that bulb as well as a reflector, it's hitting the glass and being reflected back in. We saw that in the BRS Investigates. Very, very little light in a water-filled box actually goes through the glass. Almost all of it refracts and then reflects back into the tank and back at the aquascape, and sometimes even hitting the sand and then back up again, right? So that is the biggest thing here, is that what matters most about T5s is that lighting object is larger than the thing, or the thing that it's trying to illuminate. All right. Another thing that matters about T5s is there's no spectrum hotspots.
No, this is one where you can't. So we do the spectrum blending test in all of our light testing that we do, where you hang the light above the tank, you put some ripples on the water, because that's usually typically what breaks up spectrum. And when you have a T5 up there, ripples on the water, and underneath the tank, you're taking spectrum shots every few seconds. In LEDs and in the lighting options that do not blend the best, you'll see spikes and jumps in the spectrum. You'll see it all over the place.
I don't even need the tool. I can look inside the tank and see red and green and shades of blue and white shooting all over the place.
However, T5 had it right early on, and we're not even thinking, I guess it was just lucky happenstance. Just the nature of the blended gases in the bulb, and the bulb being, it's a frosted bulb, the reflectors, it all comes back down. There is no individual spectrums here. You can change out the bulb combos, and still, by the time that it hits the water, even before it hits the water, the spectrum's completely blended. So when you do that dynamic spectrum test down below the tank, flat. Those spectrum peaks do not change.
The nature of the bulb is it's illuminating a blended spectrum of all these things. Nature of the LEDs is they're all little individual peaks that we're just trying to essentially, without the diffuser, you're essentially taking these little cones and hoping that they're just going to overlap enough that they create some new color.
By the time it hits the tank.
Yeah, but the problem is that the ripples on the surface of the water don't allow those cones to actually do that. They capture that light. It's those magnified caustic lines, but now it's a magnified caustic line laser beam of red, green, whatever color it might be, and it depends on where even the strength of that beam is probably really, really high at the top of the tank, less so at the bottom of the tank. So you can debate this one all over the place. Does it matter whether or not the spectrum is blended? I'm going to skip that debate, because if I gave everybody an option where they were perfectly blended, or one where I'm visually seeing red, green, and blue shoot all over the place, and the meter is telling me that it is not blended, 100 out of 100 reefers will pick the option that is blended. If cost is taken out of the equation, all the rest of it's, if we're asking about which one is best, 100 out of 100 reefers will tell you the blended spectrum that came from T5s or halide bulbs, or even out of well-designed LEDs with diffusers, are a superior way than just allowing these caustic lines of laser beam
620 nanometers straight.
Boom, hit it super hard, because we don't even know the effects of that at all. And
well, and that brings us back to the point of the one we just talked about, is if the ultimate goal is to emulate the nature and the sky and the sun, there are zero individual wavelengths of color in the ocean. There is no beam of red, there is no beam of green, there is no beam of straight UV or infrared.
Actually, I had a friend of mine that actually put the Philips coral cares over the tank, right? And then they had some problems with the SPS at the very top, and reached out to Coral Care, and they said, "Oh, you have mounted it too close, and the spectrum's probably not blended well enough at that point." Even the diffused option, the manufacturer, and sure enough, he raised it up, and it's the same par level, still matches the same par, but now the spectrum, and now he's not having those problems at the top of the tank. So, thinking about one of the reasons why T5s work so well is
no
definitely that. Okay, this is actually one of the big deals too with T5s was the setting recommendations are just how many bulbs to the application.
Yeah, I did a bunch of investigating tests on 4 bulb, 6 bulb, 8 bulb, and some different bulb collar combinations. And that softy LPS tank, that 50 to, or that 75 to a 150 range of par that you're trying to shoot for, all I needed was a 4 bulb T5. Mixed tank with some SPS at the top with a little bit of higher par at the top and still that same lower par in the middle. All I needed was a 6 bulb T5. And for some reason, like this hit, even though I wasn't, I'm a big T5 fan, and I have been for a long time. I've had 4s, 6s, and 8s. And so 8 bulb was what you would consider when you wanted an SPS-dominated system. And I don't even remember the conversation being like, it was just a conversation that was known. If you're not going to get SPS or what you need for SPS if you get a 4 bulb.
So for me, like when I entered, there was only 2 options. Like there was buy the tech fixture or buy the ATI fixture. I mean, there was a bunch of garbage out there too, but it was here's a cheap option with the tech fixture. There's no fan and whatever. This is how many bulbs you should use if you want LPS. This is how many bulbs you should use. SPS, here's a couple of combinations of those things. And so it was like really a debate between 2 fixtures and a couple bulb combinations. Like you could settle on what was best really easy, or a whole group of things that were working.
There's not a whole lot of camp to argue about one of the 6 bulbs, which combo is better than another combo, and their spectrums are so close together. The blue plus versus the aqua blue special versus some of these other, or the true actinics. Their spectrum ranges aren't a whole hell of a lot different.
Or they just add in a little bit of
subtle difference, or like add in like the 420 nanometer peak, so you get some vibrant fluorescence. But
basically, like the blue plus and the aqua blue special, the only difference is the
little bit more white.
They pulled out the green and yellow, and which just made more blue. And so that is one of the things is like nobody was failing with T5s because it's like everybody knew exactly how to advise each other.
Yeah,
we all had settled on the right thing and go do that, plug it in the wall, put it on an 8-hour timer, and call it a day.
Well, and it was easy for you to go find somebody who, say, find a mentor who's doing what you want in the tank that you want, and just say, hey, what's your bulb combo? And I used to, that was one thing I loved to do, is in my description of my forums or watching other people's descriptions in their forums, their signature line had the A+, comma B+, comma C+, comma AB+, and you knew that that was their T5 bulb spectrum, their T5 bulb choice. And so I just go buy that.
Super easy, man. Yeah. Emulate people's success is a couple bulb choices and a plug it in the wall. What also matters most is T5s are the cheapest way to do this exceptionally well.
Still today.
Yeah, horizon to horizon, 360, blanketed in light. I cannot think of a way of doing that, achieving that same goal, bouncing off the glass, coming back in because it's so wide angle, doing that as well for cheaper than a T5 bulb.
I think it would be extremely hard for us to find somebody whose tank failed because T5 due to the T5 lights. It would be something completely different. You could never. I could
grossly misused.
I don't know how you could do that either.
Yeah. Okay, so what also matters most, we already managed here, or mentioned many times, is T5s lever the glass. This is actually kind of a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in the past is, when we used to test, or like when everybody used to test lights in open air, it would look like things with focused reflectors, like halides with little focused reflectors that kept it in the grid.
Deep punch.
Yeah, or LEDs with super narrow lenses were like the most efficient and had punch. They could get it to the bottom and would have the most light. That's because in that environment, the wide angle T5s are like spilling out all over the ground, and you're just not measuring most of the light. However, when you put it in a glass box and it all refracts and then reflects back into the tank, all the light stays inside the tank, or most anyway.
It's probably what fueled that conversation that only metal halides could grow SPS and T5s couldn't. And
it's crazy talk.
And then finally, like, well, look, I'm doing it. What do you mean?
I know way more people that had success with T5s and halides. And it's not that halides aren't successful, because obviously they are. But like, if you're talking about super easy plug and play, and part of it is because there's actually a lot more options for halides. There's a lot more bulbs actually, are different kinds,
different kelvins,
different kelvins, and there's a lot more reflectors, and the reflectors were easier to screw up if you didn't know what they were doing or the right mounting height, because you could burn things pretty easy with that. But hard lessons number one with compelling data for T5s on your reef tank. We just said a lot of reasons why they're awesome, but some hard lessons.
These are some hard lessons. They're going to be hard for a lot of people to swallow, but we believe it's true. If you were reading the tea leaves. First hard lesson about T5s is the bulbs specific to our purpose in our industry, in our hobby. The bulbs are limited runs, and there's a limited timeline that they're going to continue making these bulbs. It's the future is short.
The future of T5 bulb production is on life support.
It's not if, it's when.
A lot of the manufacturers don't even produce the bulbs. They do like limited runs. They'll turn the factory back on for a minute.
I mean, it hurts. Yeah, it hurts my heart to hear it, but you have to embrace if you just look around the world in industries outside of and outside of ours. Those technologies are being phased out for newer like LED type technologies. Office lighting is one of the biggest ones. You think like the amount of money that's made from office type lights and T5 fluorescent bulbs versus the amount of money in the industry for the hobby and the special spectrum wavelengths we desire, we're going to be one of the first bulbs to stop being produced.
I mean, just look at you could go to Home Depot a long time ago and see T5 everything, fluorescent bulb, everything.
Get cases of them.
Yeah, now, dude, it's all LED, right? So all the uses. And like, if you think of where T5 lamps are predominantly used, it is mostly in warehouse and office building type environments, right? Those things are all switching over. In Europe, they're forcing them, and actually where most of the aquarium bulbs are actually the European fluorescent tube manufacturers. They're allowing them for certain instances to continue creating them, but eventually that factory isn't going to be profitable to run anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so if I had to wager a guess on it, there's not more than a few more years of bulb production. So if you are into T5s, heart and souls, this is your way to do it.
Stock up.
Go stock up on bulbs because you probably want 10 years worth because it's not, they're going to go away.
You think about like as a hobbyist, I'd be like, well, why can't KZ just continue making these bulbs for the industry? Why can't they? No, they don't make this because their name's on them, these bulbs are not made by those people, and in probably almost all instances, they're made by a factory that makes those bulbs, but they're special runs.
Yeah, there's a handful of companies that make T5 bulbs in the world, and they've reached out to the best ones and said, hey, make this specific formulation. But if they stop making T5 bulbs for other applications, it's done. And I actually would have been surprised that it hasn't already ended already.
Oh, yeah.
Like halides are almost gone.
We're going to get to those next.
Yeah, but like, so I don't know. I'd be curious to say, like, if you guys share, do you think that 5 years from now somebody will still be manufacturing, and not an aquarium company, because aquarium companies don't manufacture bulbs, that some giant facility produces
Philips,
global like production of T5 bulbs is still making these things in 5 years? I
don't see it.
I'd be shocked.
Come back. Come back and share this video with us.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. All right, but it is a limited time and limited runs. So
another hard lesson here. This one isn't like super hard, but it is something to think about.
It is, especially we're doing it right here on the 160.
You have 110 volt power hanging on something that weighs about 80 pounds above the tank, hanging from the ceiling.
We talked about this in our safety and electrical episode a couple days ago.
If your hands are in there and that thing fell in, you're gone. Right? So that's one of the benefits of today's technologies is like they're like DC options of driving the LEDs, and they don't have 110 hanging over the power unless they're really, really, really cheap options.
Right.
Some of those do, but like most LEDs don't do that anymore. So, and I say that as somebody who, not with T5s, but with compact fluorescent bulbs, I had my hands in a frag tank and bumped that thing. The little plastic core life legs fell off and went in there. And if I didn't have that dry lock floor, I wouldn't be here talking to you about it. So, back in the world where there was no other option than 110 over the tank, I understand. But like if you talk about safety with anybody, putting 110 volt power hanging suspended with cheap legs or drywall being the thing that's preventing you from getting fried, or anybody in your family,
scary.
You could debate whether or not it's a terrible option, but it's not the best option by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, when you really sit down and look at it and think about it, you're like, man, that is kind of scary.
All right, so there is also a piece of biology which we've been talking a lot about, but also I want to see the thing with my eyes and love it.
This one hurts me.
Okay.
Hard lesson for T5s, and I'll embrace this now, even though I fought it for so long. The flat T5 look is a 5 out of 10, and I agree because I've had just the flat T5 look. And I've since then, added LEDs. I was supplementing with LEDs on my 90 cube, and ever since I had some LED strips. But I can agree with you that flat, everything is floating. These fish aren't swimming in the water. There's no shimmer lines. There's no nothing. It's just flat. It's like a painting on the wall with no motion.
Yeah, if you just only got T5s and that's the only thing you're running. Again, it looks like that painting of a picture, not of a piece of a reef that came out. Also, what it looks like is that teal color. There's no way of getting around this teal color that pops out of all of the popular bulbs, the
specifically Blue Plus
and the ATI Blue
Aqua
Special.
Blue Specials.
All of them have this weird, I shouldn't say weird, they just have this teal color in there that visually to me just isn't ideal. I don't have the shimmer, and so if I'm talking about perfection, meaning 0 is just total garbage and 10 is the best the tank could ever look, if you peel out all of the shimmer, the rhythm and the sense of movement out of the tank, and you kind of add this kind of turquoise color to it, I mean, you could debate whether it's a 5 or a 6 or a 6.5, but getting past 6.5 when 10 is perfection, I just don't think you can say it. So, and the reality is you bought this thing and you built it to look at. The way that you absorb it is visual, right?
Well, it goes back to the last episode we just covered when we said that it's the sun, it's the sky, and it's those caustic lines, those shimmer lines, and everything in the ocean that plays a part, in the health and the vitality, the growth, the corals. T5s, obviously grew corals, so you didn't need the shimmer lines, like we said in the last episode. You don't need them, but if you're taking a slice of the ocean has that in there. Now I can't live without it.
Nope. This also hits on this one, that teal color. Is it looks terrible on camera. Like nobody's phone can take a shot of a T5 only tank without it looking super washed out and terrible. And 15 years ago that wasn't an issue, man, because we all had flip phones.
No Instagrams and Snapchats.
Yeah, we weren't sharing our pictures that way. I had to use Photo Bucket to be able to share a photo on Reef Central, right?
That's true, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's not the same thing today. Now you want to share the stuff instantaneously, and I can tell you right now, like we told you that this is a T5 LED hybrid that's happening behind us.
Those are Blue Pluses and Kessels.
The T5s are off. In every video you see of us here, we have to turn the T5s off, otherwise it looks terrible on camera.
Yeah.
You would just look at it, and it would all look all washed out and teal and terrible. So in a world where people like to share, that kind of tealy peak or whatever the T5 bulb is doing does not come out on camera.
We also said in the last one that features don't grow coral. But there's a nice feature of LEDs where I can, have a setting on them that goes photo mode, and then go take a picture and then set it back. If I wanted to do that with T5s, I'd have to unscrew a couple bulbs and get to my whiter ones. But we didn't hit this one here.
Yeah, I got a couple more.
Right.
I just thought that we were talking about that teal color. So the teal color, though, also they're the options of the T5s now, once you've unlocked this spectrum box and I have the ability to tune it, both into a spectrum that's good for the coral, but also visually for my eye. Well, the only options that you had before with T5s were really I could, add a little bit more purple, I could add a little bit more red. It was, and artificially too. I didn't add a lot of violet in many cases. I added that purple plus bulb, which was just more red because red and blue make purple. It was really limited, and you were also not totally even because I got one purple plus over here and these are blue pluses, so the tank isn't really actually 100% even. I don't know. That's one of the problems with those bulbs is you also had to buy twice as many bulbs as you needed and swap them all out until you finally get to the color you wanted.
Well, it may have been a curse and a blessing in that I didn't have the keys to all of the spectrum like an LED does, so I can't turn my tank 100% red or 100% green or 100% violet because their bulbs didn't exist to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is another piece. How do you get rid of fluorescent tubes?
I've always thrown them away, but I know now that is completely wrong.
They're filled with mercury. So you are not allowed to put those things in your trash can. Yeah. You might do it anyway, but for anybody that chooses to not put mercury into a landfill or pollute the groundwater or whatever, you have to bring those stupid bulbs to a recycling center.
Yeah.
Or break them. And if you break them, you don't want to breathe the stuff that's inside of it. Dude, they're hard to get rid of. They're hazardous waste, and they're filled with mercury. And when you get rid of those bulbs, in fact, a lot of people I know, you can just go over to their house and their garage has 60 of those things in there because they just have never gotten around to getting rid of them.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there waiting to break.
Yeah, in some places you might have to pay to dispose of them. I don't know. I don't know about here. It seems like something like places in California or some heavily populated places would make you charge you a fee to recycle some hazardous waste.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So, the T5s. Don't get us wrong, man. I love them. They're on all kinds of tanks that I set up. But at this point, I think it's time to embrace. They're on life support at this point in time. And so, how do we use new technology today to emulate the things that we got out of it, and actually not just achieve the same level of benefit, but let's beat it. Let's get the same performance and then all the other things that we want as well. I think that needs to be the goal now, is to not just be as good, but be better. And I am certain that we can achieve that. So, what's next?
Next, we're on episode 20 of the 52 Weeks of Reefing. This one was all about metal halide lighting in the reef tank, a recipe for success. That was the title of that episode, but our core belief is slightly different than that.
Core belief. I mean, anybody out there that's a halide fan, get ready to hit the thumbs down button. You're going to hate this statement, but it's true. A core belief on halides is halides are awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, but already dead for nearly every application or industry. The thing that came to my mind is anybody who has seen Serpent and the Rainbow.
I have no idea what that is.
All right, well, there's this guy in there, and he's like, it turned him into a zombie, and he's screaming, "Don't bury me, I'm not dead." And, it's just like, the halides do some things that are really cool, and in many ways, they are actually the sun and the sky in one single product.
And the caustic lines.
And the caustic lines, because you have the bulb, which is a single point of light, you have this giant reflector, which creates the sky effect, and you'll have the shimmer lines all in one. So, why is it that they're dying? And your answer is the same thing.
You said nearly every application in every industry.
Yeah, so if you think of, there is no company in reefing that makes halide bulbs. They go ask a halide bulb manufacturer to make bulbs for us, right? And you've seen so many of them come and go. All the XM bulbs that used to be popular are gone.
Phoenix?
The Phoenix is, I think they make once in a while, they make a run.
The Ushios?
Ushios, barely around.
Yeah, there's a few other ones.
I can't remember. Here's the thing: is every application for halides, or nearly everyone, has gone away.
Horticulture being one of the biggest industries that was used for, and now you can tell that is gone way of LED.
They're totally done.
Yeah.
The halides are so inefficient. They create so much heat, so many problems for horticulture. They're done.
Yeah.
Halides are gone. Street lights used to be halides. They're done.
Warehouse lights, you were saying.
Yep, warehouse lights in the sky. You can see them there. They used to be halides. Those things are largely done as too. There's no application for super inefficient, really hot lights anymore.
Yeah. This is back to that T5 conversation though too is I know just because one is branded maybe Reef Bride or one is branded Ushio, it doesn't mean that is the actual company that makes them.
All right, so here's what matters most, though. As bad as that news is, let's talk about some cool things, actually.
All right, so what matters most about metal halide lighting is that more than half of the light is because of the reflector. If you were to remove the reflector from the metal halide bulb, you would probably see very dim lighting in your reef tank because all of it's spilling out everywhere else. But when you add that big, giant 2 foot by 2 foot reflector, it's bouncing not only here, and intersecting and all the way back, but all of it's forced downward.
So if you think about this as that little teeny ball inside the halide bulb, is if I just put that without a reflector 8 inches or 12 inches above the tank, roughly, what is that, 90 degrees of it will actually enter the tank, right? Okay, the other rest of the 360 is going to go outside the tanks, towards the ceiling, every other direction than in the tank, right? Yeah. All right, now if I take that reflector, or that bulb, and I recess it inside of a reflector, all of a sudden, all of the light that light's eliminating has been rebent down and shot into the tank from a million different angles, right? Yeah. Okay, so it's the reflector that's actually illuminating the tank. And so it's a sky and sun effect again, whereas the reflector is probably 3/4 of the light entering the tank and 1/4 of it is actually coming out of that bulb going directly into the tank. So when we think about why halides work so well, and for the super nerds that were really into this back in the day, I think they were called luminarcs or something like that. But they were big, giant, like 18-inch or 24-inch by 24-inch reflectors. That was the one, man, that everybody...
Oh, really?
I mean, we had like group buys and stuff where we'd buy like 40 of them at a time for the group, and we'd shave $10 off each by doing it.
I remember the Hamiltons and like the Hamilton Bimini Sons or whatever they were. And
then like, so the nature of it though is we didn't know. And like, it was interesting because when we started doing our testing, you could actually see the design of the reflector down in the bottom of the tank. And you would think that the center of the tank would be the brightest spot in the tank. And actually at all the levels, it was actually the outside edges of the tank under the reflector. And the bulb was actually reabsorbing some of the light that was getting reflected back in it. And so the dark spot was actually in the middle.
That's completely opposite of LEDs.
Opposite of what you would think. So when you think halides, think reflector, think the reason that it worked, again, is horizon to horizon lighting coming 360 from all angles, not from a single source of light. Yeah. Okay, and so in that spirit, what matters most about halides is reflector size is more important than the bulb choice.
More important than the bulb. I mean, I can get, so you've seen, I think of like Giesmann's and some of these single fixtures that have maybe 1 or 2 halide double-ended bulbs in them, but you're looking at a reflector that's, like 6 inches by 6 inches or 4 inches by 4 inches. And when you combine that with other ones, I mean, basically we're looking at small pucks of LEDs in a similar fashion that when you put multiples together, you're going to get intersecting points of light, and then you do fill up the entire tank. But as far as like one single reflector that's a 4-inch by 4-inch reflector is not going to give you the same even lighting from all angles, 360 degrees, as a 2 foot by 2 foot.
Yeah, the reflectors that are this big are actually going to perform like today's LED pucks. Yeah. Whereas the reflectors this big are going to perform like the sun in the sky.
Then how do you make LEDs perform better? Make them big, yeah?
Well, there's something to that. Yeah. So with the reflector size, and you can think about it too, actually, this is actually true of T5s and fluorescents as well, which is the reflector size, you remember, I don't know, most of you probably don't remember this, but if you use those double-ended bulbs, which are like, basically the size of my 2 thumbs instead of this big, huge bulb, that actually output a lot more light. but there was two things about them that probably were doing that more than anything. It wasn't that the bulb source maybe was producing more light, it's that the tiny little reflector that they would put about those things would focus the light into the testing area much better than a big one, right? So if the goal is to illuminate a testing grid in air on the ground, it's probably going to do that way better than if you were trying to illuminate a large box of light from every angle. Also in there is, because the thing is the size of my thumb instead of a big bulb, there's less of the light reflecting off of the reflector back into the bulb. Same thing with T5s. So my first tank was PC bulbs, and everybody says that T5s perform so much better than PC bulbs, which was like a power compact, which was like a fluorescent that was bent around itself. Remember the spiral guys you used to use?
Yep.
Okay, so the big difference here is not so much the technology that was in the bulb itself, it was the fact that when you had this double chain of two PC bulbs wrapped around it, the reflector design was really inefficient and would reflect back into the bulb, heat it up, reduce output, and waste all this light going back into the bulb itself. Meanwhile, with the T5 strip, the parabola, or the shape of the reflector could be designed so efficiently to get it around the bulb and back into the tank. So it's much about the reflector as anything else. Okay, third one here.
Third one thing that matters most when we're talking about metal halide lighting in your reef tank, a halide with a huge reflector has all of the T5 benefits, but with shimmer, the sun and the sky in one source.
So the sun and sky, one source, it's the halide, it's like, the king of all lighting, right? I can get it. And I will tell you, if I had to go back and look at what I think is the best color of any tank that I've ever looked at, it's the radium halide bulb.
20K?
Yep. Mixed with the Reef Bright strips with their little contraption they had.
Yeah, that was RT's tank. He had that metal halide Reef Bright fixture with T5 combo, or with LED strip combo with actinic LEDs.
Color awesome.
Dang.
Right? Okay, so shimmer, everything. Had the full package, real deal. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, why are they dead? Why are they, don't bury me, I'm not dead? Why is it people are calling for them to come back? Well, all this stuff. You can see there was a lot of value.
There's a lot of benefits.
Hard lessons on this thing. I'm going to share the first one, is actually the third one in here.
Okay.
Heat is the deal killer in this one. No one wants to run a chiller on their tank.
Such an inefficient type of light supply, because inefficiency is measured in energy output or energy lost. Heat being a lot of energy, and that's what these things produce, just mass amounts of heat. And then you got it in a reflector that's kind of pushing all that, or keeping all that above the tank, pushing a lot more heat down into the tank. And now you have to subsidize with fans, or even if that doesn't keep up, then chillers, and just the sheer amount of inefficiency, energy inefficiency from these things make it difficult.
It's double-fold energy efficiency.
Yeah.
It's all of the wasted energy created in heat, and then all the energy of having to essentially run an air conditioner in your house, which is a chiller, in your house, and then it's also adding all that heat into your house, in which your air conditioner of your home now needs to compensate for as well outside the house.
Well, you're talking like a single metal halide being either a 250 or a 400 watt option, when my LEDs, my big form factor LEDs are in like the 180 watt range.
Okay, so there's another hard lesson in here too, that let's say we got over the heat, and I was willing to run a chiller and buy a chiller.
I'm in a Minnesota basement where it's always nice and cool, so
heat's
not my problem.
Whatever. Okay, the second biggest problem is size. Like, the size of the ideal reflectors are not those tiny little teeny guys, which you might see in a fixture that looks really slick on the outside, but from a performance standard creates laser beams. I think of the Giesman Spectra and Infinity or something, or whatever it is. Those little tiny reflectors look really nice inside there, man, but they are creating a laser beam hotspot, and they're not blending. You can just look at it now, and now that I know what to look for, I can just see it. That it's not going to do that.
So the ideal size would be something that coast to coast, horizon to horizon, and you're probably going to need multiples to get that done. So like the 6-foot tank, 2-foot chunks, you'd have 3 different metal halides that completely cover the entire top of the tank, and they're tall. A lot of them are like super deep.
18 inches deep, 18 by 18, 24 sometimes. They're the Luminarcs. I think the Cosmel from Hamilton.
Cosmel,
they're big, man, and they take up a lot of space. You need a big giant hood for it, and
if you want to hide them,
if you want to run those things. And so the space issue alone for I think most people, once you look at it from, I know it's a dying technology, I know the light sources are going to dwindle, it's going to be inefficient, it's going to create a lot of heat, it's going to require a chiller in a vast majority of cases, which is just another thing that could fail on me. I'm going to have probably new outlets ran to there to be able to run all of that stuff. Well, it's just a lot to get over, man, for the average person. And another hard lesson is the punch that people said halides have the punch. It wasn't the halide. It's just those tiny little reflectors in some cases had the punch. So
we're not poo-pooing on metal halide because they brought us to where we are today, and they're gorgeous. There is undeniable. It's undeniable how gorgeous tanks these metal halides can make, and the 20K Phoenix bulb and what that can do. Some of the best SPS sticks ever grown under those wavelengths and stuff. But to be brutally honest, or to be honest, like this last hard lesson here, we have to be at this point in time. This has to be on the verge of the last metal halide for reefing hobby-related bulb runs.
In fact, I remember talking a couple of years ago to the Battle Coral guy, and he told me he was, going after, I think it was the Iwasaki 6500K bulbs. He was starting to hoard them then, even years ago, because they were getting really hard to find, and he doesn't believe that they're going to be around.
I mean, it's any indication that we just don't have metal halide stuff on our website anymore.
Okay, so, and I was the biggest advocate for having halides because, I'm a dinosaur. I obviously really like the stuff, and how can you be a reefing company that doesn't have halide stuff? But the end of the story, dude, is you guys never bought it. So when nobody was willing to buy it, it was just collecting dust on the shelf. Finally, after years and years of dust collection, I had to relent and get out of the way. My dinosaur self has to create an opportunity for a new future. I don't know. But really, for a long time, I was like, we cannot be a lighting thought leader and not have halides here. But in the end, if nobody is willing to buy them ever, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, and now it's getting even harder to source if some were. So
yeah, that's a piece that we're going to talk about with LEDs and pretty soon here is there is creating the things that are perfect for biology or even visually, and then there's creating things that people actually want to buy. And the companies that make these things make things that you guys buy. And so if you're not going to buy the halide stuff, nobody's going to make it. And the reality is the halide bulb manufacturer, everything is drying up, so it doesn't even really matter if anybody bought it. It's going to dry up regardless. So, love halides. Probably the single one thing that can actually emulate the sun and sky in a single form factor, but also already dead. Just nobody's told them yet. So, what's next?
All right, we are moving on to a big chunk of the conversation. This one is episode 21 from the 52 Weeks of Reefing. This one is called LED Reef Lighting, LEDs. Tuning par, spread, and spectrum is what we called that one back in 52 Weeks in 2015. Lot of evolutionary knowledge gained over those last almost decade.
Dude, yeah, since 2015 we learned a lot, man. There's so many new things and ways to think about it. So I think you'll come along for the ride here. The big one probably we already mentioned earlier was about shadowing, but core belief here. This is the core belief. I'm curious if you guys will chime in on this one, if you feel like this is true. But this to me kind of solidifies everything that's like right and wrong with LEDs and where we need to go. LEDs are the solution to all the problems that we just talked about. So LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard. I'm going to say it again. LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard.
The solution being the sky, the sun, the caustic lines, these types of things.
Lower par, no heat, not gigantic. Like looks elegant on the outside of the tank, looks awesome in the tank. I don't have all of the heat challenges. I don't have bulb challenges. I don't have hazardous waste challenges. I can tune the color that it's visually appealing. I can do all of these things.
But we're making it so hard.
Yeah, man. Like it is the solution to a better world. But man, are we making it really, really hard because we're not designing to the application. I think we're designing to what people want to buy.
Yeah, and we'll soon find that doesn't help
our
pets.
What matters most? This piece is lighting to the application, number one. So lighting to the application can mean a few different things. Like we're lighting to photosynthesis, we're lighting to LPS, we're lighting to SPS, and I think I'm going to leave it mostly in this conversation to the last two things. Like, so when people say, hey, you should buy this light, it's the Razor's the best, the AI Prime's the best, the Red Sea Reef LED is the best, Radion's the best. A lot of it's all like, brand identification.
Yeah.
Like I love that brand. Me and that brand, I don't know.
I spent that money on that brand, and now they're the best.
Yeah, purchase defense, research defense. But the reality is we're lighting to an application. Meaning, if I'm going to light to a LPS tank, I don't need 350 par. I certainly don't need 600 par.
Yeah.
I need 50 to 150, and because a lot of the large polyps there are actually capable of moving and exposing different tissue to light in different ways, it's not as important about shadowing until they get bigger as well. In fact, shadowing in this case may actually create a really high contrasty kind of cool look for an LPS or softy or polyp tank, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, lighting to the application, if I want a SPS tank, meaning wall-to-wall SPS, just a Crayola box of color, well, you know what? Now I need end-to-end light, man. Horizon to horizon. These things are branching corals. They grow fast. They shade their neighbors. They shade their insides. They will die if you don't. So if you do not consider that factor in some fashion, and there's different ways to get horizon to horizon using LEDs, which we'll share in just a minute. It's not just one big giant panel of light. But if you don't consider that with SPS and the fact that I need to be 350 par, well, we missed the application. So
of course it didn't work.
The advice needs to actually kind of match that when people are asking, like, hey, what light should I use? They're like, well, what are you going to use it on? Give me a size of the tank. What kind of coral are you going to put in there?
How far along are your corals? Like, how old is your tank? Because maybe I'm switching, maybe I have nubbins, or maybe I have colonies. That's going to budget. Those are all choices that are going to affect your decision on what lighting option to recommend.
Yeah, like, so if you're going to throw a bunch of zoanthids in the bottom of like 18 cube and somebody told you to buy an XR30,
you're silly.
Wow, that person's advice is terrible, man. I don't know. But if you were going to light a 180-gallon tank and somebody told you to use 3 XR30s, like turn sideways to get front to back, excellent choice. Like these are the widest angle lights that we have tested.
Yeah.
Excellent choice, man. So it's what matters most isn't the brand, isn't the output, isn't all this stuff. It's identifying what it is you're trying to do and then go find the right tool for the job.
Also, next thing that matters most is, this is an old Pontiac commercial, I believe it was. Wider is better. Leverage the glass, unless you need to mount it high. Wider is better, meaning like my 180-degree beam versus 55-degree beam. My 206-degree angle from a bunch of multiple lights on one little piece versus, again, my 55-degree narrow beam. And then when you do have that wide, 200-degree, 180-degree beam, what that does is now shoots light towards the edges of the glass. And what we've found recently with the water-filled boxes of glass is it reflects back in, and very little light actually comes out of the tank.
Almost none. Yeah, and so I cannot think of an application in reefing other than high mounting where wider lenses don't perform better. And so if anybody's using lenses to focus the lights into beams, the only reason that you would want to do that is because you're going to mount the lights pretty high, or you're trying to win a marketing battle with a par meter. That's really it. If you want to produce a light that is going to illuminate a tank evenly and support the growth of coral,
the wider the
lenses, the better, man. In fact, in many cases, no lens actually performs better than lenses. All right, another one is what matters most is a blanket coverage can be achieved in a variety of ways.
Yes.
I mean, blanketing the coral, the aquascape, and everything in light, 360 horizon to horizon, can be achieved in a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be achieved in the way that we did it 20 years ago. So the first one is a grid of wide-angle floodlights. Wide-angle floodlights similar to like what's the biggest one that comes to mind? Kessel A360X, right? It's a single point of light in a chip that's about the size of my thumb, less than the size of a quarter, but it has a 180-degree beam angle. So it's a wide angle floodlight. So if I put one in the tank, I'm obviously going to have shadows over here because there's no light coming from this side. Same thing on this side, or it's not 360 degree coverage. But when I start putting multiples in front and in back and all around, now I'm intersecting all of those wide angle lights. I can get it done with less wide angle floodlights than a whole bunch of spotlights. Because the intersecting points of lights is much greater with 180 degree lenses. But that is one way to get the coast-to-coast coverage. The horizon-to-horizon is use multiple wide-angle floods. Yeah, you're like creating overlapping cones of light, right? They come from different angles.
Yeah, you can think of a narrow beam 55-degree angle as this small cone that does this, but 180 as this big giant cone that spreads quick.
Okay, so there's one caveat to this one, which is most of the lighting, like dispersion, like the sizing, like this light covers a 2-foot area, is done in an open box, not in an aquascape. So it's done in either open in the air or in a glass box filled with water. But in either case, it's done in a manner which doesn't account for the fact that there's obstructions, the aquascape, the corals itself, the neighbors, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, in a totally unobstructed environment, those overlapping cones of light will create an even amount of light. In a world where there's obstructions, it probably isn't over a 2-foot grid. You're probably going to move them closer to like 18 inches.
Right.
So if I'm going to make a grid of super wide angle floodlights, most cases spacing them about 18 inches apart is going to have a better result than spacing them 2 feet apart. Now, one of the things you got to calculate though is, so like with the Kessel 360 or the 500, is the point of light is about 1.5 inches or so big, whereas like something with a XR30, the point of light is like probably 10 or 11 inches big.
Yeah.
So like when I either turn them side to side or I space them, I probably only need them 18 inches from each other, not from the center of the light point, or from the edge of the light point rather. So it is as big as the object if I'm going to use multiple modules. So if I got 1-inch light source, probably 18 inches apart from each other, a little less depending on how you orient a bigger light source as well.
you can also get this blanket coverage done with a large panel.
You know, before we move on to that one, actually, one of my favorites, even though it's a lot of cords, and one of the cheapest ways to create those overlapping light sorts is actually the grid of the AI primes.
10 AI primes. We did it over a 120-gallon, 4-foot by 2-foot tank. We were in our SPS dominated zone. And when you calculate the 10 AI primes compared to like 4 or 6 other lights, bigger fixture lights, it actually winds up being a little cheaper.
Yeah, we found like one AA prime actually illuminated a 2-foot area enough for LPS.
Yeah.
Like a little $200 light that's this big.
60 cube.
Yeah, and then like, let's pretend I had an LPS tank with a 120. I mean, that means you could get away with 2 of those. But what if I want to go now to a mixed tank? Well, now I could go to 4 of them. I'm creating those overlapping cones of light. Now when I want to go super duper SPS, front to back, cover it, I need to make those overlapping light. I could get 6 of those things and have them cover roughly about 14 inches a piece, right? And now, you know, it's kind of a versatile tool in that manner, where if I want to create this, it won't be the exact same thing as having that blanket of light from an object that is larger than the thing it's trying to illuminate, being, you know, T5 grid or whatever in there, but like, it's pretty damn close if you think about it that way. If you just put 2 lights on it 2 feet away from each other, and you think in an unobstructed environment that they would overlap, well, yeah, sure, but when in an environment that has shadowing in it from the corals and the aquascape, absolutely won't do that. Shouldn't expect it to, and there's a bunch of different ways to solve that.
Yeah.
So next one.
So we're talking about how you can build this blanket coverage and how you can achieve it using LEDs. And another way to do it is just build a large panel. Just a large panel of LED. The Philips Coral Care, one of the first to actually approach it in this manner. You know, the Radions of the world, the G5s, the Neptune Skies of the world. Their form factor is getting larger and larger and larger. I don't know, I could see someday, the ATI Stratton's another one. I could see someday maybe we get back to like a 48-inch by 2-foot LED panel that is similar to T5s. I don't know.
You know, one of the grids that we didn't talk about, I don't know if it was in here actually, is a grid of LED strips. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you take the
that's
LED.
the next one.
Oh, is that really
the
next one?
That's how we make it with the next one.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the grid, the wide angle floodlights. So, yeah.
Large panel.
And the large panel. So, when I first saw the Philips light, I'm like, there it is.
There it is.
There's somebody finally decided to make this thing.
Yeah.
Now, the only problem is it's like 20-some pounds or something.
The first
bunch of cords.
Gen 1 was just heavy, yeah.
Even Gen 2 is heavy.
Gen 2 is heavy. But
they're
like passively cooled.
There's lots of awesome things. Passively cooled, really robust. I think it's various degrees of waterproof. But man, it's super heavy and it's going over a tank, man. Like, most people don't really want to mount it to the ceiling. And like, it's got all these extra cords coming out of it. And actually, the ratio of LEDs of white to blue, there's like way more white than anybody ever used, which means that like, I end up not getting the par that I wanted out of it because I'm turning half these things way, way, way down, right? Yeah. So that was the Sky. The Sky is a very similar light to that one, has the same technology in it, but it's designed to the applications that have been a warehouse light, in my mind, designed to be above an aquarium. Or a repurposed warehouse light, I should say. But also, then you got the Stratton, like a super thin form factor. I can't help but wonder if 5 years from now, you're going to see
a Stratton that's 48 inches long,
just
or
panels,
60-something inches long,
just
or
panels that go over the tanks, because
3 or 4 of them.
There's no question that works. It's like, and it's one and done. I put it on the top of the tank, I let it go, I'm done. Right? Legs now work and stuff. I don't know.
Get back to the T5 days.
Yeah, but large panel is definitely another way. So overlapping wide angle floodlights.
That one makes
large panel.
Large panel makes sense because T5s are where large panel. Metal Halides.
It's really easy to make
giant,
the connection.
Yeah, those are large panel.
It's easy to make the connection too that the large panel like the Sky from Neptune is like
if I'm a little coral nubbin down here.
Well, it's about the same size as the reflector
Yeah.
of a halide.
Yeah.
You know, you can really kind of start to see why these things would work together. Same thing as if I had a grid of 6 of those LED strips. I'm going to cover the same level of area.
Well, that's the next way that you can create blanketed coverage that we're talking about. The third way of creating blanketed coverage is a whole bunch of LED strips. This is one that we found we were doing some investigative testing. I tested one individual Reef Bright strip, like a 50-50, and come to find out that it actually has better spread and higher par than a single T5 bulb. And now what happens when you put those in a whole bunch of them, a bracket of them, like you would like a 6-bulb T5 fixture. Well, basically, I just built an LED style T5 fixture. It's just strips of LEDs, 6 of them, make it 48 inches long, hang it over the tank, and guess what? Magically, I now have a full blanket coverage of light.
If I had to say there was like the most underrepresented, poorly understood option of lighting the tank, is that. It's those LED strips put on a bracket. And I say that because we didn't understand it.
Yeah, Orphic has it, Philips, or Reef Bright has it.
But very few people they use these strips as accent lights instead of as the primary, meaning like if I put these strips in there, I can just use a bracket, use 3 of them for LPS, and if I want SPS, I can use 6 of them. And in fact, we found that the LED strips, not only the individual ones, like you said, as a wider angle than the T5 bulbs and their reflector, but when we put, I think it was 5 of them on the bracket from Reef Bright, it actually had the widest dispersion, most even light of all the things that we tested. And again, basically end to end on one end, almost end to end on the other end, almost horizon to horizon, no doubt, understand why it works.
I could understand why some bracketed LED strips would actually should be a top choice for some people, in that rather than being tied to the spacing of LEDs in a fixture by the manufacturer, I don't have my bracket doesn't have to be with the LEDs side by side like this. I can actually make a bracket that they're spaced out a little more, make a bracket that they're spaced out or more spaced out. So now I'm changing the point of intersection for all of these lights, getting a wider, more even coverage from multiple LED strips.
Absolutely. All right, and so of those are the 3 options really to get a blanket of light. Is I can use a bunch of LED strips, combine them together. I could have one object that's close to as large as the object you're trying to illuminate, or closer to that anyway. Or I can have a bunch of wide-angle intersecting cones of light that overlap each other. Any one of those things is going to achieve it. And so when
we have to remember that we need to be trying to achieve that blanket of light.
You have to want that to begin with.
Yeah.
But this is the pieces. You guys are probably watching. Well, which one should I do? Which one should I do? Whichever one speaks to you, because they're all going to work. And that's a piece up here. Is a core belief is LEDs are the solution, but we're making something easy really hard. Right, and so don't spend all day thinking about this. And I will say that the manufacturers haven't helped. Part of it is they tell you 24 inches because they want to market it as that, because it makes it seem like it's cheaper or something. And they're a little afraid to tell you, hey man, actually, if you're looking wall-to-wall SPS, dude, 18 inches would be better. But that's what we want to know. I want to be told what is going to help me succeed, not what I think is advice that's going to make me buy something that isn't going to help me achieve my goal, right? So we're making something as a community that should be easy, hard. Any one of those solutions, overlapping cones, a big panel, or even LED strips combined. Any of those things, horizon to horizon skylight. All right.
We also think that matters most about LEDs is that the best LED options will produce a cohesive blended spectrum. This gets back to emulating the sky, the sun, the caustic lines, the filtration of the filtration of the spectrum as it goes through the water. You don't see bright red, bright green, bright UV, individual caustic beams in the ocean. The best LED options will also not have that. They will have a blended cohesive spectrum.
Again, this is a debatable topic. People will debate this all day long, how important it is, because again, we're actually, when I have that cluster of LEDs, what I'm doing is creating overlapping cones of different spectrum, and hopefully in the middle it all blends together. But I'm not doing that in an actual reef environment, which the red bounces off of the caustic or the ripples in the surface. The ripples in the surface create a lens, focus the light, and shoot little laser beams of red, blue, and white, and all this stuff all over the place. So here's the piece. I mean, you can debate all day how important it is, but if we're talking about the best options will produce a cohesive blended spectrum, 100 out of 100 reefers, if I put them all next together and said, do you want all the little, like, if I can see the little things of red, blue, and green and whatever shooting all over the tank, or do you want the one that is perfectly blended, got all of it, isn't shooting spectrum hotspots all over the place? 100 per 100 out of reefers will say, I would pick that one if cost wasn't the issue. Now you're buying some of the technology along the way, for sure, that achieve better results than other things, but like nobody will say it is unimportant and I would never want that. It's just a matter of, is it worth the cost to achieve that technology? Another is what matters most. The best options won't have visual technology artifacts, right? So T5s didn't really have, T5s had a visual technology artifact, which is the super flat, low contrast look.
It's just part of that technology.
Really tealy. It had some artifacts of the types of technology that was used. Halides, the only problem I ever had with halides is sometimes if you used too much of the reflector banks on it, it would actually create its own type of disco, because there'd be like the little point of light is reflecting off of too many surfaces, and then it would be just too shimmery as well. But in this case with LEDs, there's all kinds of visual technology artifacts.
One of the most commonly referred to as disco ball effect or crosshatch, or I mean, this is something like if you take a white background, you put some flow in a tank, and you put your LED above it, and you look down at the bottom on that white thing, all you see is like this TV static screen crosshatch rainbow of colors. Or you look through your aquascape down in the bottom, and you see this one point of light that's just steady green, steady red down there. That's a technology artifact.
Yeah, so technology artifact, I'd say with my favorite shimmer producer, the Kessel, on its own is really hard-edged shimmer. Like it's got a lot of really hard edges to it, and it's really busy looking. It doesn't look like disco, and it doesn't look like TV static, but it's got a hard-edged shimmer to it. It's one of the things I really enjoy about that light, but I like to soften it with other light, so a diffused T5 or diffused LEDs or T5 bulbs, where it softens it. And if you think about the ocean, if you took away the skylight and you only had the sun shoot off the shimmer lines, it'd be the same thing.
Sharp shimmer lines.
Super sharp, really, really harsh looking lines in the ocean. It's the fact that the sky's coming in and diffusing it all and softens the overall look. So that's the same thing that happens in a reef tank. Now, another thing that you'll see in Artifact is, especially with the lights that use narrow angle lenses, is you'll see the little bits of green and red and stuff shooting all over the place, like little ants all over the place. And it looks disco-y because a disco has like a mirrored effect to it, and the mirrored effect brings color into it, and so it just looks all weird. But even worse than that to me is when you have a grid of undiffused LEDs. So a big, huge sheet of LEDs that are undiffused, or often even sometimes the light bars, is it gives us this weird staticky look. There's just so many single points of light that they're overlapping each other so much that if you look closely, it just looks like fuzz and TV static and flashy.
And that's not only to mixed LED colors. I think the one that we kind of saw this fuzz on its own was like you said, LED strips. Single color, one LED color in the entire strip, put multiples of those together, and you look at the shimmer and you're like, man, that is really staticky looking. Something weird about the way that those single points of light.
So many, hundreds of single light points may create all. So there's no longer like a shimmer line. It's just kind of like fuzz. There's like a sense of movement, but it's just kind of like literally like watching a TV static.
We're kind of lucky here because we get to see all of these different things. Like we can plug in a light and go look at it. And like, trying to explain it is.
I'd actually say that we're unlucky because once you know what good looks like,
once you've seen
you see the other thing everywhere else.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? All right. So the best options won't. And this is like, you can debate how important all these things are, but if you're talking about the best option, the best options won't have visual technology artifacts. I think 100 out of 100 reefers will tell you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so also what matters most, the number of options and configurations means that there'll never be the same ease of use. Par meter is important. Meaning,
there's so many brands, so many styles of LED, wide angle flood, spotlights, big, large diffuse panels. There's so many choices to choose from. Not as easy as like there was two main T5 light manufacturers. You picked one and you put bulbs in it. And there was only 6 bulbs. We talked about this in the last T5 episode. There was like 6 or 7 bulb combo choices to choose from, and you throw it all together and then you light your reef. Here, there's not only just a whole bunch of like dozens and dozens of manufacturers of LEDs and the types that they make. There's also the spectrum of each LED or the diodes that they choose for their specific light. There's the control that you have. Some have 8 channels of control. Some have 4 channels of control. The options are like limitless.
Old days. Buy a ATI, SunPower, buy a tech fixture, here's the bulb configuration, plug it in the wall, you're done.
Easy.
Today, all that garbage you just said. There's so many things, man. We'll never, and there's so many new ones coming out, we'll never ever settle on something as simple as use 4 bulbs and call it a day. Yeah. And so that is why a par meter is so important today. Yes. Just set it up. Get it into the range you want. You're caring for some animals in here. They live in certain ranges. The human eye doesn't do it well. Again, you can pick one up for $200, or you can actually buy one from us, and this is one of those rare instances we'll let you use it and then return it with a restocking fee in 2 months.
Yep.
Use it and perfect your system, share it with your friends, share the cost with them, and then return it to us. We just want to make it easier for you to be able to set these things up perfect.
And now, didn't really need that with T5s and Metal Halides because they were so plug and play.
Yeah.
The standard hanging leg mounts and things like that made it, I don't need to test par, I just need to put some bulbs in there and go.
By the way, you can also buy a slightly used one because those things go into open box if you want, and pick up a slightly used one for 20% off as well.
Par meter.
Make it easy though. Another thing here, what matters most, if I had to pick one single light that is the collective best, right? And so that's the one thing that everybody is asking.
What's the best light?
And wondering.
Yeah.
And sometimes I avoid this kind of conversation because it just tends to piss everybody off, like everyone involved. But the answer, you guys want to know the answer of what we believe here, so I'm just going to give it to you anyway. If I had to pick one single LED light that is the collective best, it's probably the Radion, right? It's the widest angle light we found. We found it mounted as little as like it was 8 inches off the tank.
Yep.
That on a 24-inch grid, the outside edges is within 20% of the center. It's dispersing the light perfectly over that area. Nothing else hit that. It has the widest spectrum, the most control over the spectrum. It has proven spectrums from people like Worldwide Corals, as well as the Canadian farm. I'm forgetting their name. But they've done actual like Coral Labs on this thing. It has the biggest offering of the blue spectrum. The diffuser blends the spectrum. The lenses actually don't create the focus points. They've already been on part of the wide angle piece of this for so long. There's clean mounting options for it. The software, no question, is the best in the industry. There's 25-inch spacing, probably for LPS with the XR15s, and then for SPS, probably 18-inch spacing with the XR30s turned sideways, getting that front to back. So if I had to pick one single light, not a single light out of here will do everything well. But if I had to pick one and somebody asked me which one does it the best,
which one would you put on your grandma's tank?
If I asked her, if she was asking me for all the things that we just talked about, I would tell her that is probably the one, right? This is the easiest one to achieve the success with, cares about the most things. But there are people that care about very specific things. And so the next thing I will say is, well, what about the sky? Right? So what about the Neptune sky? Because you're talking about that's the new one. How does that fit in the equation? And I'd say that the sky is what I'm using on my own tank.
Yeah, I use the Radion, he uses the sky.
Okay, if you don't mind the size of the panel, the size of the panel, man, is the solution to shadowing.
Yeah.
I have a hood. I don't mind the size of the panel. I don't even see it.
You can't see anything under there anyway.
And so, I know that all of my most successful tanks have had horizon to horizon lighting like this one, right? I know that. I know that's where success lies. And so I don't care about the size of the light. And so that's why I have those. And then I use the Kessels in there to add shimmer. So not a single light is going to do everything that I specifically want.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And I got a lot of quartz, man, and it's nerdy application of the whole thing, but it is also, doing the things that I want it to do. So if you don't mind the size of the fixture, solution for shadowing, if I had to pick the balance between quality and affordability with LED modules, though, it would be the Prime.
I mean, that was a dark horse in the whole lighting testing that we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, is seeing this little tiny 55-watt AI Prime full little spectrum LED. And when I put it to the test in like an 18-inch cube, a 24-inch cube, the 60-gallon cube, and then you ran it through the test of the 120 and multiple fixtures. This thing is so versatile that, like you said, maybe I'm starting my journey. Maybe I got little nubbins, and as we said episodes ago, like you have to change and evolve with the growth of your tank. This is one of those LED lights, the AI Primes, that I can actually do that, stay in the same ecosphere of light that I have. So I'm buying AI Primes, and then I'm adding more AI Primes as my nubbins get bigger or as my tank desires change. But this is one of those ones where I can get it done without all that, without the upfront initial cost of buying like all of the Radions to do the same thing or the Skies to do the same thing. It can grow with me, but it's capable of reaching those just by adding multiple fixtures.
So in that spirit, if my grandma asked me and said, hey, I don't want to break the bank today, but I'm willing to get something decent that will grow with my tank and my needs, and I can pick things up over time that help me, AI Prime all the way. And the reason, and because of all that, don't be surprised that AI Prime is the number one LED module that we sell here at BRS that you guys are buying.
We have the numbers.
So you guys are voting for it with your own dollars as a community. The AI Prime is the number one light source that you guys pick up. So not surprised there. So some direct advice there from somebody who's tried all of those things many times, tested them in a ton of different environments. If I had to pick and answer that question to the best of my ability, that's how I would answer that question. So some hard lessons with LED reef lighting, tuning par, spread, and spectrum. So we got a better understanding of how we use LEDs, but what are some hard lessons?
First hard lesson is there are LEDs that are made, there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, and then there's what grows corals. There's LED, when you talk about like features and function and aesthetics and things like that, you can get lights that are made to sell, you can get lights that are made to look awesome, and you can get lights that are actually just made to grow corals.
So I'm gonna give you like a little behind the scenes here. Like there's a bunch of different things that sells an LED. One, like if you show me a picture of a big giant panel on top of a tank, and then you show me these two really sleek little modules, and you didn't tell me any other information, you just said which one do you want? Well, I want the two sleek little modules, man. Like, but I don't know the conversation about shadowing. Yeah. I don't know the conversation about the sky, the summer, the sun, and the caustic lines. I don't know what makes a good light source for a photosynthetic organism that requires me to know those things, actually.
You're making a decision based on your own personal desires and not what's best for your pets.
Yeah, so like I asked people a while ago what was the most important thing to a light source. You know, was it spectrum, spread, mounting, easy use, blah, blah, blah.
Looks good.
50% of them actually said that it comes with the easy to use mounting
mounting option.
Mounting option.
Yeah.
The number one thing for half of the people was that it has a mounting option. And I totally get it after they say that, because if I can't mount it reasonably on the tank, it's totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah, it doesn't
if I don't want to drill holes in the ceiling and support 20-pound lights above my tank, it's totally irrelevant to me. If I don't have a wall bracket, you don't have that option, you don't have a hood option, it's just totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really easy. But you know what, like from a manufacturer's perspective is, you know, it's really easy is if we make one little module that serves all purposes and sits on a shelf in a really small form factor and there's only one SKU.
It sells.
And it just so happens that people want to buy that as well. Well, we'll just make that. That's just the way the world works, right? Mm-hmm. But if you guys say, no, I want a different option, or I want to use them differently, and you make it okay to say, hey, yes, space at 18 inches for SPS, well, man, that is what they're going to do, and that is the advice they're going to give. So there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, and then there's what grows corals. Those things might not be all the same, but they should be.
Yeah, and there are some that do kind of, that bridge a lot of the gaps. I mean, we just talked about the AI Prime that is our #1 seller. Mm-hmm. It also, you know, I actually think that grid of 8 to 10 with primes. The primes with the aluminum framing that we kind of built. If you if you were actually kind of DIY that up, it actually looked pretty cool, minus the big giant rat's nest cord. But it grows corals for sure.
Well, and the current evolution has totally changed. I mean, you see it in the radions, right? Like the fact that we shifted all the way from par wars to the primary concern is that the outside edges of that 24-inch square, only 6 inches deep in the tank, is within 20% of the very center. Means there's no more hot spots, man.
I can use all of the LED channels to 100% because so I'm not just buying channels that I don't even use just to get par. Yeah.
And that was like it actually, we didn't put this one down, but that was an interesting component that I never saw coming when we did like the little showdown. That with the radions, they actually had one of the lowest cost per par. Right? So that's like everybody debates like what is the best LED, what costs the most, and like you're looking at like price points of $400 and $600 and $800 or $200, whatever it is. And you don't really think about, though, when we averaged over the intended use space of at 3 different levels, 108 points, what was the average par inside this box? When it's spread out, not just laser beamed at the bottom, but I'm thinking about it at multiple layers, cost per par, and how I'm actually going to use this thing. The radions actually was like amongst the lowest. It was like number 2 or 3.
In the top 5, yeah. Both of them, the Pro and the Blue.
Yeah, so like the best actual for the dollar as well, which was, we had to redo the numbers, man. Like I went and saw it, and like, there's no way. Nobody looks at the radio and says, well, of course it's the best. But nobody would come back and look at it and say,
it's the lowest cost per par.
Lowest cost per par. What? Nobody anticipated that. And so part of it is they use the right ratio of LEDs, and so you can actually turn them all to 100% if you wanted and use it and look at it and say, well, that looks like a nice tank, where I'm not turning half of them down to 20%.
Yeah, exactly. So we just said that there's what sells, there's what looks awesome, there's what grows corals. The next hard lesson here is that's in the wrong order. It's is this for me or is it the coral? And that's like that decision you said. If you were to put two tanks together, side by side, gorgeous looking tanks. And on one side you had this big, bulky hood hanging over. I can see the wires hanging up to the ceiling. Or on this other tank over here, I had nice, sexy little modules, evenly spaced across the tank, barely any cords to find. Which one would you choose? Well, that's a decision that's a decision I'm making for myself, not what's best for the pets that I'm trying to keep, because we are trying to keep pets. So when you think about it in that order, there's what grows corals, what looks awesome, and then what sells.
I would love it if what sells was last.
Oh, yeah.
Like what grows corals, what looks awesome, then what sells, the priority. It isn't. It's actually in the reverse.
Once you checked box 1, move on to box 2.
But it's demand from the community that will change that. We have to ask for what we want, or nobody will ever give it to us. All right. So, and I think that relates actually to that aquascape thing. You mentioned this earlier. Like when I build an aquascape, we said the other day, like an aquascape is for my eyes, a habitat is for the animal that lives in there. So the light is the same thing. Am I doing it for my eyes, or am I doing it for the animal that lives in there? Okay, so another hard lesson. Compact light sources have a ton of visual or usability advantages, but not really ideal for a photosynthetic application. So again, if you have a bunch of them overlapping the cones.
Compact light source meaning like your LEDs or your pucks that are about like this.
Super small. They do work when you have a bunch of cones, but if I'm just going to use one, there aren't many photosynthetic applications that anybody would use that for. It doesn't matter if it's horticulture or,
Unless I'm trying to light only one single object that's about the size of my thumb, then this one compact source of light might actually work for that.
Most of the time when you see those compact light sources, it's because they mounted, like in horticulture, they mounted them 6 feet above the light, and there's a million of them.
Exactly.
They're overlapping each other.
Yep.
All right, so another hard lesson. Par wars and narrow angle lenses set the hobby back. Let's embrace that fact. Par wars, trying to get the most par, like highest possible horsepower out of this thing, and the narrow angle lenses that focused it down to the bottom, prevented it from hitting the glass and bouncing back in, and getting good even spread. That era set the hobby back and hurt the trajectory of reefing. We're now correcting that.
This is probably where, and unbeknownst to a community who doesn't know better, or anybody who doesn't know better, this is probably where that disdain for LEDs comes from, and probably still lingers. Is that either maybe you saw somebody get burned by LEDs, you got burned yourself, or they just weren't working as well as metal halides and T5s. It's because we weren't building, and the initial outset of LEDs were not manufactured in a way that was coral forward thinking. It was how much par can I fit in there? How small can I make the form factor? And a good way, easy way to make the form factor small is by having narrow, small, close together LEDs. But in the end, that was the wrong direction from the outset.
Luckily, the thought leaders here are changing that trajectory, right? And so the new generations of these lights actually go in the entire opposite direction.
Yep, 100%.
And so now when you see it wasn't LED, there's not like some magic LED photon.
There's no magic T5 photon.
Magic T5 photon, it's not that. It's this. The technology wasn't being used right, and so. And it wasn't embraced in the same manner of T5s. It's like, do it this way and you'll be successful, right? That is the baseline that we need here, which is, and I'm gonna say it, like, we already know the par zones. We already know that LPS, man, 50 to 150, start at 50, work your way up, don't go the other direction. We know LPS or SPS, 200 to 350, start at the low end and work your way up, don't go the other direction, right? We already know horizon to horizon, wrapping the corals in light produces the best result, unquestionably. We know that blending the spectrums into behaving like both the sun as well as older technology is the right ideal move. We already know these things. Let's implement them. Let's demand themselves from ourselves and the people people that supply products for us as well.
That's our core belief at the top of this episode was LEDs are the solution to our lighting, but we're making something super easy extremely hard.
It's because we're not united as a community. We're still having these like separate little conversations all over the place. So let's take the things that matter the most. You don't have to agree with everything that we say here, but like, you know, take the things that you buy into and let's march forward to a better world. So another hard lesson is related to this, which is knowledge transfer is the only thing that will change the demand in what is made. You know?
If we are united as a front in asking LED manufacturers to make that choice of what sells, what looks awesome, and what grows corals, and reverse that so we're thinking about our pets and our animals first, united front asking for that and transferring that knowledge of this is what we want, this is what we're trying to achieve, it's then when we will start seeing those massive changes.
And you've seen it, and this is the way that it usually goes.
We're starting to get there right now, too.
This is the way it goes, is all of the most expensive options that have the best engineers and the most tooling and the most resources will develop this for you. And so you see it in the Kessels, you see it in, AI and Ecotech have been doing lighting since, like, I think, about the time that BRS existed, man.
Yeah,
like
Gen 1s.
15 years. You know, so like they've been doing this forever. So don't be surprised that it keeps coming out of these companies as the thought leaders, right? And then you'll start to see the other places that don't have the same engineering expertise, they don't have the same R&D to start to emulate the things that come out of those environments.
So that only means inherently, that the technology, the proper technology, and what we're looking for is just going to get cheaper and cheaper. There's going to be more cost-effective options because, you know, once these ones are more successful and they're pioneering the path, and then there's people following along. A lot of the times those follow-along products are a little bit more cost-effective.
You're going to see this. You're going to see the cheaper options someday. Next 5 years or so, start to emulate the super wide-angle approach from the Radions. If you're willing to wait 5 years, you'll probably save a few bucks. You'll see the caustic approach from the Kessel and the small little lights show up in different form factors probably. You'll see the wide panel light like the Sky and the Philips Coral Care. You'll see those things. Those are the future. All of those things are already here, and you're just going to start to see the others trickle one way into that direction.
So it's not everybody fall back on the T5 and metal halide technology, and
we're already beating it.
We're already beating it. You just kind of patiently wait it out.
You have to embrace it and then use the tool in the right way to try to achieve it. If you use the tool wrong, then we're not there.
Yeah.
But if you understand what you're trying to do, we're definitely there. So, what's next?
Up next, we're talking about episode 22 of the 52 Weeks of Reefing. This one was called Reef Tank Lighting. What's on our tanks? It's the T5 Hybrid.
Okay, T5 Hybrid.
That was what was the first going on the 160 in that episode.
I will tell you straight up, all of my most successful tanks have been a T5 LED Hybrid. End of story, right? And if you've been following along with all these episodes, you'll know why that is. You can connect all the dots, right? But here's the core belief in this one. I'm going to tell you today, it's just a hybrid. It isn't a T5 hybrid or LED hybrid, or in fact, in the past, it was T5 halide hybrid, which was the gold standard, right? All right, so the core belief today in terms of hybrids is emulating the sky as the primary source of light, the sun, and the caustic lines with a single light source has proven to be elusive.
Yeah.
Trying to do all of those things inside of one single form factor has proven to be elusive. Respect that nature has a hybrid approach as well. So let me repeat that one more time. Emulating the sky, the sun, caustic lines with a single light source has proven to be elusive. Respect that even nature has a hybrid approach. Meaning
sun, bright single point source of light. Sky, wide diffused fill light, caustic lines shimmer.
Yeah, I mean, like bright little shimmer,
Yeah.
looks beautiful,
Yeah.
and it is important. And we're not just looking here for something that's going to grow coral. We're looking for something that looks beautiful as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what matters most in this case, which is in relation to hybrid lighting and trying to find that elusive solution that manages all of it. This is where the intersection of biology and a visually powerful tank emerges.
Yeah, and in the aquascape video that we talked about, in the aquascape episode we talked about a while ago, we said aquascape is for us, habitats for your fish. You can have both. Same conversation here. You know, is that biology or intersection of biology, lighting for biology, so your pets, but visually powerful image that's the whole reason you brought this tank into your house in the first place.
I want it to look awesome.
You can have both.
Yes. Okay, and what matters most, being larger than your object you're trying to illuminate.
Yes.
Horizon to horizon source of light.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this all day. It's horizon to horizon source of light, emulate nature. It has to incorporate that. It can be the cones of light, of intersecting light. It can be a big sheet of light. It can be strips of light. It could be all kinds of different things, man. But
The overall goal.
the goal should be to wrap the object in light. All right, next one.
Well, also what matters most is coupled with small, compact, intense light sources like the sun.
Yeah, so the Kessels come to mind, the Prime comes to mind,
Yeah.
even the Red Sea Reef Lead
Yeah.
comes to mind. Those things are a compact source of light.
Like the sun.
Like the sun, easily shadowed, high contrast, but man, they create a really nice shimmer because they all come out of one single source of light, a small compact source.
Yeah.
So any one of those things are what's going to add the visual appeal to the tank, as well as a little bit of strength to the lighting that fits into that puzzle as well.
But we're trying to get the sun, the sky, and the caustic lines together.
So historically, I would tell you that some T5s with some Kessels was the easiest way to achieve that.
I mean,
Throw your T5s in there. You got to have a hood in many cases to do that, though. Or you could buy those like pre-made kits.
we started with the three.
Aquatic
We had the
E170 was T5s and a Kessel in the center.
Yeah, this one has always been Kessels and T5s. It just went from Kessel 360s to Kessel 360Xs.
Yeah, we actually did some AP 900s in the middle.
Yeah,
somewhere
we did
there.
AP 900s too. Yep.
Always that is the hybrid solution, which is the intersection of biology with a visually powerful tank.
Yeah, and I think the thought process was that that T5 was one of the best at diffusing that sharp caustic line from the Kessel. You know, if you had Kessels on their own, really sharp, harsh caustic lines in the water. Some people like that amount of shimmer, but sometimes it gets a little overpowering, and you diffuse it. That T5, you just like that teal blue color from the ATI Blue Pluses. It really diffused that very well. So this was a really popular choice. When the hybrid conversation first came out, it was T5 LED hybrids.
So I think there was a little bit of a hammer solution, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like the problem is like we weren't at the time having as much luck as we would like with some of the solutions we were using, and so everybody knows the T5s work, so let's just do the T5s and we'll accent them with the cool things, the features of LEDs.
Yeah.
We get the color, we get the shimmer, we get all
Happy
the other
accident.
things. And it's just kind of like a happy accident,
Yeah.
but like part of it is we didn't understand what it was that the T5s were actually doing and why it was successful.
Yep.
Because despite a contrary belief here, T5s do not produce magic photons.
No.
There aren't any magic photons inside that bulb that are somehow different than the LED
Growing
ones.
coral bell are better than any.
If only God himself came down and blessed the T5 bulb as the only solution for reef things. It never happened, man. It's not true. It's just that there's wide angle fill light.
Yeah.
So wide angle fill light from any source that creates that horizon to horizon of well blended spectrum will work. It's a reflector, it's an LED, it doesn't matter, it's not a magic photon.
Yeah, you can achieve the exact same thing that T5s were doing when hybridizing them with LEDs with other LEDs.
So if I had to do this, there would be a couple of different ways now. I could do it with LED strips. I'd either diffuse the LED strips, or I'd probably use LED strips that were largely just one color, not like 15 different colors in there.
Right.
I'd use it just like largely just the blue spectrums, and I'd use the sunlights to tune in the color that I'm looking, the wide angle spotlights. But more likely, what I would probably do at this point is use big wide angle diffused lights like the Radion XR30 or the Skylight that's all diffused, creates that big wide angle light that coats the tank in even light, and then use the Red Sea light, the Reef LED, the Kessel, the AI Prime to add in the shimmer in there as well.
Most of your PAR and coverage isn't coming from those single point source of like sunlight replicators. It's the sky. Same thing in nature.
Yeah, and then instead of thinking about it as like a couple of LED strips on the outer edges, what I got is these big wide angle panels that are from the sky, or like medium sized XR30s in there. And you could go 15s as well, but these things are coating the light and space them right to be able to do it, and then in between them is a couple of high points of light that will create the shimmer that I'm looking for, because it's that piece that we talked about. The sky, the sun, the caustic lines from a single light source has proven elusive. Like once you try to make a blended cohesive spectrum from a big form factor, how do I then incorporate within the same light the shimmer things? So that is proven elusive within the same light. So that's why, probably the most advanced end of this, the people that are really, really into reefing, and this is the nerdiest end of this thing, which is, this is where the intersection of biology and a visually powerful tank emerges. Yeah. This is when we decide to apply everything we know to get the coolest looking thing possible that also cares for the animals.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I also believe what matters most when it comes to hybrid lighting is that LED light bars can be even wider and lower maintenance than the T5s. So T5s of the world, reflectors, and those reflectors, depending on kind of like the shape, will give you like how wide of spread those things have. We tested a couple T5 bulbs versus a couple LED strips, and found like 24 inches and 36 inch ones, and found that the LED strips actually spread more evenly and put out like 20 or 30 more apart.
The ones that we tested, by the way, were the Reef Brights, which don't use lenses, other than the lens of the LED itself, and they put it inside of a reflector.
Yeah, exactly.
Inside of that strip.
The XHOs.
Yeah, and so that's why it's so wide. It's a really wide angle lens on the LED itself, then hitting a reflector, and it puts out a really wide angle light that blankets whatever underneath it in light. It's super long, it's big, and it is the right solution. Now, you look at, not all LED strips will be the same. Because you can go look at LED strips and then inside of it is a whole bunch of little focused lenses. Yeah. The ones with all the little focused lenses in there and no reflector, they're probably not going to produce as wide of an angle, or they won't be able to replicate the T5 and reflector anywhere near as well. Yeah.
So. We also believe matters most is that a wide angle module like the Radions is likely the best.
We said the Radion's meant it quite a few times in this thing, and the reason for it is because they're setting the standard.
It was a complete form factor change from Gen 4 to Gen 5. I mean, Gen 4 had single pucks. Each LED in each puck had its own, HEX, or I forget what the term was, for its own lens. So every single one of them had their own lens, meaning that each beam was focused individually. And the complete change in form factor was now the Gen 5s that no lenses or hardly a lens, a frosted kind of bottom to them without the diffuser on there, and it creates this. They were spaced even further apart over this 12 inch or 13 inch by 8 inch area, and now you get more than 180 degrees of beam angle coming off of that light.
Yeah, that is the standard, is if you can disperse light that evenly over the area without the hot spot in the middle, you're beating the technology artifacts, and that is what the thought leaders do in any industry, right? So you have challenges of the technology used, and then you beat them, and they're beating them. So that is why I think that they keep coming up in the conversation. The fact that they happen to do it for one of the lowest cost per par, I want to say it, man. The fact that they can do it amongst the cheapest when you consider how many you need to use to achieve the same effect. It's not that like one module of something over another will be more expensive, because obviously a $400 light is more expensive than a $200 light. No, it's if I want to achieve the same net result in the tank, being the same end-to-end horizon coverage bouncing off the glass, I want the same technology, I want the same mounting option, well, all the things that comes with.
How does that cost compare to the application?
The fact that it's the lowest cost per par, measured at 108 points throughout the tank, at least in the top like 3, how can that be?
It means that I'm achieving the goal I'm after at a lower price because this is doing it so effectively.
It kind of reminds me of like the Kirkland value matrix of more, better, less. But more, better, less, and like sometimes I go and I buy like a $10 bottle of wine from them, right? And it's pretty good. Yeah. And sometimes I buy the $20 one, just like a little signature blend. That one's awesome. Yeah. But they said, I watched some video, and it's like they go and buy like Grand Cru grapes that otherwise would be $100 somewhere else. Yeah. It's the value matrix, and some people $20 is too much for a bottle of wine. Some dollars at $10. But if you spent the 10, the 20, man, the value matrix is super duper high.
It feels like you're getting the $100, $200
price
bottle.
Per par, probably the best matrix of that whole thing. All right, so what matters most also is the big panels, like the skies, obviously. We don't have to operate the same way it's on the sides. Yeah. We can actually cover the whole tank and then put the shimmer in the middle, in between the panels.
As we continue down the future of like the reef tank lighting and the LEDs, you're going to find different form factor options that fit you. Metal Halides in a 2 foot by 2 foot or 18 by 18 versus T5s that are 48 by 4 bulb, 6 bulb, and 8 bulb. We'll continue to have options like the Radion that is this small of a form factor that spreads the light out so well versus the Sky, which is like this form factor that does the same thing, or if not something uniquely different in that I only need 2 of these instead of 3 of those, or what have you.
All right, so reef tank lighting hybrids. Hard lessons. There still are some hard lessons here. The first one I would tell you is cords. The nature of hybridizing solutions is you end up with a lot of cords. Like my first hybrid in the 360 was 6 different Reef Brights.
Oh, 6 different,
And then I think I had 4 Kessels in there.
And I think the Reef Bright had, those XHOs had 2 cords per strip. Because
they were controllable, so I had controller boxes.
12 cords.
I counted it up, and it was like 30-some cords to make this operation. It's insane. Hard lessons is in many cases you'll have a lot of cords in
the hybrid,
And by the way, the hybrid solution that like is readily available to everybody is definitely the Aquatic Lights and the Reef Brights now, where you can just drop in whatever light you want in the center, and they have that now LED strips on the side, meaning you don't have to get rid of those hazardous bulbs anymore or buy bulbs or worry about them anymore. And so for the average person, you just want to take a lot of what we're taking today, just the aquatic life, and then put your favorite LED in the middle is often a really simple solution.
Worked for the UN70.
The one that thing comes to mind though is there's extra cords there for sure. Yeah. But Another hard lesson.
Hard lesson, and we learned this in the flow episode, and we're learning it here too, is that brand affinity doesn't matter. I mean, we should stop this argument about, Kessels versus Radions versus Skies versus Primes versus Hydras, all these different, I like this brand over any other brand, because in the end, actually some of the best options for creating this hybridized lighting comes from multiple different types of brands, multiple brands. Your 360 is right now Skies and Kessels, achieving what you're looking for.
The question is, what's your goal? I mean, it goes to the beginning of the whole LED or the whole lighting question is like, what is your goal? And my goal is horizon to horizon lighting that wraps the objects in light and then adds a shimmer in a cohesive manner without visual artifacts.
You never said a brand in that statement.
No, I didn't say a single brand in any of that.
Yeah.
It's about what my goal is, and then I go use the tools to achieve that goal.
100%.
All right, so another hard lesson is the best sky or fill light, horizon to horizon light, will be diffused and blended. So if you choose options that aren't diffused or aren't blended, it won't soften the sunlight the same way. It will have some artifacts of lighting. So the best options will again be like any option that has a diffuser on it that blends all the spectrums together. I think it's a hard lesson because I will be honest, man, when I added the Reef Brights there, 6 of them, it did kind of give the tank a little bit of a fuzz to it. Yeah. So I'm much happier with this Sky solution that's on there now.
Well, I mean, T5s were the best at the diffusion portion. And when it comes to blending, I'd probably, in technologies of old, not talking LED now, there's Metal Halides probably did the blending the best because there was only one light bulb. So the color you got out of it was the color you got out of it. That was it.
Mm-hmm. It just is a way, man. Yeah.
But those worked really, really well at this.
So the last hard lesson that I'm gonna say here is, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. Don't pursuit of perfection, because you'll probably never find it. Think of the options, and I'm gonna say that thing again, man. The pursuit of perfection for me, horizon to horizon light, wraps the corals, wraps the whole aquascape in light, provides visually appealing shimmer with as few artifacts of lighting as possible. And we just gave you a whole bunch of options to do it. You don't have to overthink it. So, go to town and build it. So, what's next?
So tomorrow, we are going through another 5-episode party. We went through 52 weeks of reefing episodes today. We'll chop all of those up at the end here, and you can get them individually in chunks. Tomorrow, we're going to go over episodes 23 through 28 of the 52 weeks. That's all about maintenance. We're talking cleanup crew, carbon, GFOs, filter socks, bacterias, fuges, ozones. We're covering the maintenance gamut tomorrow at noon, right here on the 11 Days of Reefing. That'll be day number 6.
Yeah, day number 6, episode 23 through 28 tomorrow at noon.
See you then.